A grieving mother stands in front of a judge, begging for justice for her son. But instead of compassion, she's met with cruel, racist remarks. What happens next will leave you speechless, especially when she reveals her son's final words and who he really was. The courtroom in Birmingham, Alabama, was tense. Judge Harold Thompson, a man known for his sharp tongue and even sharper biases, sat high on his bench, looking down at Maria Johnson. Maria, a black mother in her late 40s, stood before him, her eyes red from crying but her posture strong. She was there to fight for justice for her son, Marcus, who had been killed just 2 weeks earlier. But instead of finding compassion, Maria was met with cold indifference and something far worse. Marcus, her only child, was just 19 years old. He was a bright college student with dreams of becoming a civil rights lawyer. He wanted to change the system to make it fair for people who looked like him. But that dream was cut short when he was pulled over for a broken taillight. The officer claimed Marcus reached for something, and in a split second, shots were fired. Marcus didn't survive. The officer walked away without charges, and Maria was left with nothing but questions and grief. Now, in the courtroom, Maria was trying to get the case reopened. She had evidence, witness statements, video footage, and even a report from an independent investigator that contradicted the officer's story. But Judge Thompson wasn't interested. Before Maria could even finish her plea, he interrupted her with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Mom," he said, his tone dripping with condescension, "these kinds of things happen. You need to move on." Maria's heart sank, but she refused to back down. She tried to explain how Marcus was more than just a statistic, how he had a future, how he mattered. But the judge cut her off again, this time with a smirk. "Let's be real," he said, leaning forward. "Your son wasn't exactly a saint, was he?" The words hung in the air like a slap. Maria felt the weight of the room's eyes on her, some sympathetic, others indifferent. But she wasn't there for them. She was there for Marcus. And she wasn't leaving without a fight. The problem was clear: a system that refused to see her son's humanity, a judge who mocked her pain, and a mother who refused to let her son's memory be erased. This was more than a legal battle, it was a fight for dignity. Maria Johnson's life had never been easy, but she had always found a way to push through. A single mother from the south side of Birmingham, she worked 2 jobs, one as a nurse during the day and another cleaning offices at night, just to make ends meet. Her son, Marcus, was her pride and joy. From the moment he was born, Maria knew he was special. He had this light about him, this determination to make the world better, even as a kid. While other boys his age were out causing trouble, Marcus was in the library, reading books about history, law, and civil rights. He'd tell her, "Mom, one day I'm gonna be a lawyer. I'm gonna fix this broken system so no one has to go through what we do." Marcus was living up to that dream. At 19, he was a sophomore at Alabama State University, studying political science. He was on the dean's list, volunteered at a local legal aid clinic, and even started a mentorship program for younger kids in their neighborhood. He was the kind of person who made you believe change was possible. But all of that came crashing down on a rainy Tuesday night. Marcus was driving home from the library when he was pulled over. The officer claimed his taillight was out. What happened next was a blur. According to the police report, Marcus made a sudden movement, and the officer, fearing for his life, fired 3 shots. Marcus died at the scene. The officer was cleared of any wrongdoing within days. The investigation rushed and riddled with inconsistencies. Witnesses came forward, saying Marcus had his hands up the entire time. Security footage from a nearby gas station seemed to back that up, but it was dismissed as inconclusive. The system had already made up its mind. Marcus was just another black kid in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maria couldn't accept that. She spent every waking moment fighting for her son. She organized protests, met with activists, and even hired a private investigator. The investigator's report was damning. It showed the officer had a history of complaints, and the evidence didn't add up. But every door Maria knocked on seemed to slam shut. The police department ignored her. The district attorney refused to reopen the case. And now, standing in front of Judge Thompson, she was facing the same wall of indifference. But Maria wasn't just fighting for Marcus anymore. She was fighting for every mother who had lost a child to a system that didn't care, for every kid who dreamed of a better future but never got the chance to see it. This was bigger than her, and she knew it. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with tension. Maria Johnson stood at the podium, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. She had just finished presenting her case, laying out the evidence, the witness statements, and the investigator's report. She had begged Judge Thompson to reopen the case, to give her son the justice he deserved. But the judge, a man in his late 60s with a reputation for being harsh and unyielding, leaned back in his chair and let out a sigh that sounded more like a scoff. "Ms. Johnson," he began, his tone dripping with condescension, "I understand you're upset. But let's be realistic here. These kinds of situations, they're unfortunate, but they happen. You need to move on with your life." Maria felt her chest tighten. Move on? Her son was gone, and this man was telling her to move on? She opened her mouth to respond, but the judge wasn't done. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he added, "And let's not pretend your son was some kind of saint. These young men, they often put themselves in these situations. You need to accept that." The words hit Maria like a punch to the gut. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her, some sympathetic, others indifferent. But she didn't care about them. She cared about Marcus. And in that moment, something inside her snapped. She straightened her back, looked the judge directly in the eye, and said, "My son's last words were, 'Tell my mom I love her, and don't let them forget my name.'" His name was Marcus Johnson. He was 19 years old. He was a college student, a mentor, a future lawyer who wanted to fix this broken system. But you're the reason it's still broken. The room went completely silent. Even the judge seemed stunned, his mouth slightly open as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Maria didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked out of the courtroom, her head held high. Behind her, she could hear murmurs starting to rise, but she didn't look back. She had said what she needed to say. And for the first time since Marcus' death, she felt like she had truly fought for him, not just as her son, but as a human being who mattered. The fight wasn't over, but in that moment, Maria knew she had won something far more important than a court case. She had won back her son's dignity. If this story hit you as hard as it hit me, hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this, they deserve to be heard.